Matt Schaff and Jared Small of DraftSharks.com here to set you up for your Week 4 waiver runs. The past couple weeks have featured a bunch of big injuries that we needed to react to. Still some of those situations going on. You can find the important ones addressed in our weekly waiver targets article on DraftSharks.com. This week, to me, Jared, feels a bit more about figuring out how to react to some certain performances from week 3. And of course, none was bigger than Jauan Jennings' 11 catches, 175 yards, 3 touchdowns for the 49ers. Everyone knows that Jauan Jennings cannot continue doing that kind of stuff. But tell me why he's not just this week's Isaiah Likely.
Yeah, I mean, that was a top 70 PPR performance by a wide receiver of all time, which is insane that Jauan Jennings just did that. You got the usage, obviously. He ran her out on 89% of the Niners pass play, so he was a full-time wide receiver, I think, as we expected. Drew a 40% target share. We did not expect that. Jauan Jennings looked like Randy Moss out there. I mean, that catch he made over a defender downfield was just incredible. He looked like the best player on the field all day. Now, this is a guy who he's been in the league. This is his 4th year, I think, and has never done anything close to this. You know, he had never hit 100 yards in a game before. He'd also never played a game without Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, and Deebo Samuel, which is obviously a big part of why he was able to have this massive game. We'll see about those guys going forward. I think, we know Christian McCaffrey's out at least 2 games. It sounds like he's going to miss more time beyond that. Deebo Samuel, we're projecting to miss this week. George Kittle is probably the one that has the chance to return. If all 3 of those guys remain out, I think you're going to be talking about Jennings as a wide receiver 3 play. I think he probably drops into wide receiver 4 range if George Kittle is able to return. When those guys are healthy, when Ayuk, Deebo, and Kittle are healthy, Jennings is not someone we're going to be able to rely on. But we know Kittle and Deebo are, 2 of the more injury-prone players in the NFL. So I do think there's some handcuff type value for Jauan Jennings beyond the short term.
Yeah, I agree with that. The reason to have Jennings on your roster is because there are multiple guys who can get hurt and give him boosts. And, he plays in one of the most efficient offenses in the league, maybe the most efficient. I got at least 2 people asking me over the weekend, should I start Jauan Jennings or like Jalen Waddle? I forget who the other one even was. And, the honest answer is maybe he'll outscore Jalen Waddle. I don't know what Jalen Waddle is going to do with Skylar Thompson. I don't know what Jauan Jennings is going to do in place of Deebo Samuel. Maybe it's a reminder to pay as much attention as we can to the player ceiling. To me, in considering those, I'm like, well, I don't know. How do I feel about sitting Jalen Waddle for a total unknown? Maybe going in, I didn't consider them evenly enough because of one being Jauan Jennings and one being Jalen Waddle, as opposed to one being a Niners receiver in that offense and the other being with a total unknown at quarterback.
And Jennings also had the Rams matchup, which, that looks like a top 5 matchup for wide receivers. So it's like everything fell into place, obviously, to have one of the best 70 performances of all time by a wide receiver. I think, how hard to go after Jennings this week on the waiver wire depends on your team situation. How bad do you need a wide receiver in the short term? And how bad do you need to win this week? Like if you're 0-3 or 1-2 and you have a wide receiver need, maybe spend 20-25% of your budget because you need to get the win this week. But if you're 2-1, 3-0, I wouldn't go that hard after Jennings. Again, I think looking longer term throughout the course of the season, he, again, is really more of a handcuff than someone we're going to be able to rely on when the 49ers offense is more healthy.
I just remembered the other one was Jauan Jennings or Deontay Johnson. And I was like, you could go either way. I would have Deontay Johnson in my lineup. Fortunately, I was choosing between a couple of top 5 wide receivers for the week. Who knew?
Yeah, that was nice.
The guy I'm relatively more interested in this week, and the guy who leads our week 4 waiver rankings in terms of suggested bid amount, which we put in that article every week, is Bucky Irving, running back from the Bucs, still rostered in only 33% of sleeper leagues at the beginning of this week. He saw less than half as much playing time as Rachaad White against the Broncos over the weekend, but Irving carried 9 times to White's 6. He outrushed White 70 yards to 17. That is 3 straight weeks now that Bucky Irving has finished the game with more rushing yards than Rachaad White. Jared, we talked about that being a possibility at some point this season. I would not have guessed that the first 3 Bucs games would include Bucky Irving rushing for more yardage than Rachaad White.
Yeah, and you'll still hear some of the film grinders say, "Oh, Rachaad White has nowhere to run, and Bucky Irving's getting the bigger holes." I mean, it's 3 games now. It's 6.2 yards per carry for Irving to 2.1 for Rachaad White, and we have other numbers that help us, differentiate a running back's play from his own line. Bucky Irving 4.0 yards after contact per attempt. Rachaad White 2.2. Bucky Irving, 0.28 missed tackles forced per attempt. Rachaad White, 0.13. Bucky Irving beating Rachaad White in rush yards over expected per attempt, PFF rushing grade. So everything says Bucky Irving has been the better runner through 3 weeks. Todd Bowles was asked after that game why, the snap split was so wide between Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. He said Bucky Irving has, quote, definitely earned more reps. So I think you kind of see the flipping happening this one. Again, as we've said in previous weeks, Rachaad White's going to hang on to most of the passing down stuff. And that, to me, kind of keeps Bucky Irving in running back 3 range as long as Rachaad White is healthy. But hey, a running back 3 should not be on your waiver wire. He should be owned in all 12-team fantasy leagues, most 10-team fantasy leagues. A guy who can start for you even when Rachaad White is healthy. And then if Rachaad White goes down, like how well Bucky Irving is playing, like we're probably talking about a top 20 fantasy running back.
And coming off a shocking home loss can only help the chances of this team looking to change something to improve the offense. Bucky Irving has shown enough to be part of that something so far. Braelon Allen is in a similar boat to Bucky Irving, still just 36% rostered on Yahoo, 20% on Sleeper, according to our numbers. He followed up that 9-touch, 2-touchdown game against the Titans in week 2 with 14 touches on Thursday night against the Patriots. That's a game where the Jets were playing from ahead for much more time than they were against Tennessee. Maybe that factored in some, but it's clear that Braelon Allen is part of the offense for the Jets, and the Jets have gotten better on offense each of the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Aaron Rodgers looked awesome on Thursday night, so you got to be excited about the offense in general. Braelon Allen's clearly a part of the Jets' game plan. He started the second series of that Thursday night game. Maybe the scoreboard helped him get some more carries, although we also saw Isaiah Davis get some run in the fourth quarter of that one. So it's not like they were giving it all to Braelon. The thing working against Braelon Allen is Breece Hall still getting like the money touches. He's playing the passing downs. He's getting all the inside the 5-yard line carries. But I mean, Braelon Allen's just winning on efficiency. He leads all 49 qualifying running backs in PFF rushing grade. He's third among those 49 in yards after contact per attempt. He just looks awesome. So there's no reason for the Jets to go away from Braelon Allen at this point, despite Breece Hall also looking good. But like, you might as well use both these guys. I do think Braelon Allen, someone we're going to get, 10 or so touches per game from going forward. That puts him in RB3 flex consideration. And again, if Breece Hall goes down, I think Braelon Allen is a top 10 fantasy running back, if not higher than that.
I would say his play so far is bad news for Breece Hall managers. Not that Breece Hall is going to go away or lose work, but it makes sense for the Jets to give some touches to the young guy who is playing well when he's in there and keep Breece Hall fresher for the length of the season, no matter how much it might bother you to watch somebody else score a touchdown on the ground. Jared, Cam Akers, tell me why I should care about him after he failed to reach 10 fantasy points in PPR, despite a receiving touchdown in week 3.
Hey man, if you started Cam Akers, you got super lucky he scored the receiving touchdowns. I mean, that game was an absolute nightmare for an Akers owner. The Texans backfield played out as we expected it to. Cam Akers controlling the rushing work, but hardly playing at all in passing situations. That was Dare Ogunbowale playing in passing situations, where there were obviously a bunch of those because Houston was down double-digit scores for the final 3 quarters of that game. But Akers handled 9 of 11 running back carries, an 82% share of the running back carries. Again, he's not going to do anything in the passing game, but this week you have the Texans 6-point home favorites to a Jaguars team that just got embarrassed on Monday night in Buffalo. So, game flow should work in Akers' favor this week. I think he will get, 12 to 15 carries, assuming Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce are out. Obviously, that's still a question mark on both those guys. But if you need week 4 running back help, I do think Akers is the best available guy on your waiver wire, again, assuming Mixon remains out.
If you take Carson Steele and you subtract Hope, then you've got Cam Akers. If you absolutely need a running back this week, sure. But if I'm taking a guy who has not proved that he's any good and he's splitting time with Dare Ogunbowale in a backfield that's probably going to get Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce back soon, don't place week 4 ahead of the rest of the season. I definitely would not take Cam Akers over Bucky Irving or Braelon Allen. I wouldn't drop either of those guys to get Akers out of week 4 panic.
Yeah, I'm totally with that. I think Irving and Allen should be higher priorities than Cam Akers on.
Teams might be in need of quarterback help this week. And if you are, you might still find some help out there. Jared, we're going to sort through some of the top options. Let's start with Geno Smith because he's the most prominent of the 3 entering the season. We'll see if he's still there, but QB 10, QB 6, QB 20 finishes through 3 weeks. And even that QB 20 week, he still threw for 289 yards this past Sunday on 76.5% completions, 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown, dragged down the overall numbers, but still been good over the course of 3 weeks at Detroit this week, and then a home matchup with the Giants. So looks like a good time to grab Geno Smith and consider using him if you need to, or even if you're not sure whether you might need to over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, Geno's playing awesome. We talked about in our preview show heading into last week that, the kind of the downside for him in the Dolphins game was Miami just not pushing back, which is exactly what happened. So Geno just didn't need to do a whole lot, but super efficient. Again, as you said, averaged 8.5 yards per pass attempt, just the 1 passing touchdown. Geno's sitting on a 2.9% passing touchdown rate through 3 games. He was at 4.7% over the previous 2 seasons. That's all that's missing from his fantasy profile right now. He's at 75% completion rate, 7.6 yards per attempt, 7th among quarterbacks in PFF passing grade. So he's just playing really well. Touchdown luck hasn't hit him yet. It definitely will coming up here. And like you said, 2 nice matchups these next 2 weeks, Lions and Giants. So I think if you're looking for short-term quarterback help, I think Geno Smith is your best bet.
And by the way, still QB 12 in fantasy points without touchdown luck being on his side so far. So we could see something significantly better than that going forward, unless you think that DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett are not just going to score touchdowns for him. Sam Darnold is the next QB on this list. QB 14, QB 4, and QB 9 finishes in fantasy through 3 starts. And I think it's important to remember that no TJ Hawkinson yet. Barely any Jordan Addison so far. Justin Jefferson missed the second half of that week where Sam Darnold finished as the QB4. And oh yeah, the past 2 games came against the 49ers and the Texans. So it's not like Sam Darnold is loading up against crappy opponents. Are you ready to use Sam Darnold as a potential starter this week, Jared?
Yeah, I think he's going to be right in that mix, with someone like Geno Smith, kind of bottom of quarterback 1 territory. Darnold's been the opposite of Geno Smith, though. He has 8 passing touchdowns on a 10.3% passing touchdown rate through 3 games. That's coming down, but he's also playing really well. 68% completion rate, 8.4 yards per attempt. Sam Darnold's 4th among quarterbacks in PFF passing grade, even ahead of Geno Smith. As you said, Matt, he's getting his 2nd and 3rd best weapons back. Addison should be back this week, if not next. TJ Hawkinson, hopefully after the bye week in a few weeks. Darnold gets Green Bay this week, kind of a neutral matchup. Again, I think he's fine to play there. Then come the Jets. You probably want to avoid him in that spot before a bye week. After the bye week, though, Lions, Rams, Colts, and Jaguars. That's a really nice 4-game stretch.
You're not playing revenge game Sam Darnold against the Jets?
No, I'm not.
That could be the biggest one I'll see. No, we'll see exactly what we're looking at when we get there. But yeah, he's been good so far. Been a little bit lucky on touchdowns, but has also been an efficient passer and helped that touchdown luck some. We'll see about this Green Bay matchup. I think it's a good time to bring up that our adjusted fantasy points allowed have been updated to include this season's numbers. We wait until after week 3 so that we have, some level of data to actually run those numbers. Before that, we're working on last year's stuff. But those have now been updated now that we're through 3 weeks of this season. And it's got the Packers as the 3rd toughest quarterback matchup by adjusted fantasy points allowed. Of course, even though we have some data, multiple weeks from the season, it is still just 3 weeks. It is still specific matchups. So we're still figuring out exactly what all these matchups look like. I'll be curious to see how Sam Darnold does at Green Bay, how a Green Bay defense fares that has looked like it's been pretty good so far. They faced Jalen Hurts in week 1, then Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. So you could say, yeah, most defenses are going to fare well against those guys. We'll see. Everything's still new this season, so we'll see what this matchup looks like. But Sam Darnold has certainly been good through 3 weeks. Andy Dalton only has 1 game behind him this season, but it was a banger. 319 yards, 3 touchdown passes, a QB7 finish in fantasy for that 1 start. Is he a potential starter for week 4?
And the first quarterback all season so far to throw for 300+ yards with 3 touchdowns was Mr. Andy Dalton. He's still Andy Dalton. You look at his career numbers, 62.5% completion rate, 7.1 yards per attempt, 4.5% touchdown rate, all like very average. So I'm definitely not going all in on this guy. To me, the bigger takeaway is that Deontay Johnson is alive again, right? And like maybe some of these other fringy guys on Carolina might pop up for decent fantasy games. Chuba Hubbard had a big week 3. He's obviously a beneficiary of the improved quarterback play. The other thing too with Carolina, first game of Dalton under center last week, 65% neutral pass rate and a +6% pass rate over expectation. So they went pass heavy with a legit quarterback under center. So again, just good news for the pass catchers. Good news for the offense in general. To me, Dalton still someone I'm only messing with in two quarterback and super flex leagues. I don't think he's going to get into the QB1 mix.
I think two other takeaways here are that Andy Dalton is way better at quarterback than Bryce Young, and the Raiders defense is not good. They have some good players, but they're not good. And we'll talk more about the specifics on that when we get to the streaming defense section. Andy Dalton did something similar last year where he got that game in Seattle for last year's Panthers, had a big game, turned it back over to Bryce Young, and then we heard about nobody besides Adam Thielen from the Panthers offense the rest of the way. So it's good for the Panthers offense. I agree. We should be hesitant to trust Andy Dalton in fantasy lineups unless we need to. I mentioned those updated fantasy points allowed numbers. That also powers our strength of schedule pages. So you can check those by position, even including IDPs. You can sort by any week or full remaining schedule, or you can also filter by a certain number of weeks. If you want to see like which running back has the best schedule over the next 3 weeks, or which quarterback has the best fantasy playoff schedule, you can do that at any point through the season to see what you're working with. You know, maybe it feeds into trades, maybe it feeds into waiver pickups, all that stuff. So check out our updated strength of schedule pages right now. Just like at quarterback, Jared, we've got some tight ends to sort through after some surprising performances in week 3. First up is Cole Kmet. His availability varied quite a bit by site when I looked. So I think it's going to even vary by league. What should we be doing with Cole Kmet off of his surprisingly large receiving day in week 3?
A big receiving day for Kmet and a big passing day for Caleb Williams. Threw it 50 something times in the game, which obviously benefited everyone involved. Kmet also benefited, of course, from Keenan Allen remaining out of that game. But the key thing here is his playing time has grown each week. He started the season playing behind Gerald Everett, ran her out on just 33% of pass plays in week 1. That climbed to 62% in week 2, up to 73% in week 3. And of course, Gerald Everett's gone in the opposite direction all 3 games. So this is how it should have been all along, I think. And listen, I kind of like Gerald Everett. Cole Kmet's a better player. He was good last year. The Bears have him on this big deal, but Shane Waldron came in and out of the gate kind of wanted Gerald Everett to be a thing in his offense. It seems like now 3 games in, he sort of changed his mind and realized Kmet's probably the better option. So again, we'll see if that playing time holds. We'll also have to see about Keenan Allen. Like when Keenan Allen's healthy, it's still a crowded situation. So I don't think Kmet is like an every week tight end 1, but I do think he's right back in that mix of like spot starters where if you don't have a locked in guy, if you have Mark Andrews, for God's sakes, like you might be considering Cole Kmet over him this week at this point. So I think in a lot of leagues, Cole Kmet deserves a roster spot.
Maybe if we see this continue until like week 11, then I'll consider starting Cole Kmet over Mark Andrews, but I'm not there yet. And this week, I'm more interested in Tyler Conklin, and it gets back to those rates that you mentioned. Even though Cole Kmet's playing time has increased 33%, 62%, 73% route participation over the first 3 weeks, here are Tyler Conklin's numbers in that category: 90%, 85%, 95%. So even though they both had the issues of no targets the first 2 weeks to a target jump in week 3, I believe in Tyler Conklin's role more than Cole Kmet's. We'll see where Kmet's goes. We'll see what happens when Keenan Allen comes back. As you said, we had both the boost of Keenan Allen being out and the high passing volume in week 3. I trust Tyler Conklin's role with the Jets. I'm not saying either of these guys is going to deliver on a weekly basis, but he's somebody that I'm more interested in stashing on my roster and considering, every week, especially for an offense that we just said looked excellent on Thursday night and should continue to be at least solid with Aaron Rodgers going forward.
Yeah, I think Conklin and Kmet are in the same tier for me. Conklin is a safer usage bet. You mentioned the route rates. They've been there every week. There's no one to steal playing time from him there. And I think he's also in the better passing game, as we talked about with Aaron Rodgers looking so good. I do think Kmet is a better talent at this point. So it's kind of, which side you want to lean on.
Noah Fant is probably the most physically gifted of these 3 guys, but I have similar concerns about him as I do with Cole Kmet. Jared, what are you doing with Noah Fant, who is just 29% rostered on Yahoo this week, so probably available in a lot of leagues?
Fant at this point is behind Kmet and Conklin for me if we're talking about, rest of season tight end rankings. A disappointing start for Noah Fant. I guess the good thing for him is that, again, Seattle's offense does look good, so that gives him upside. But just a 12.6% target share for Noah Fant so far. You ran her out on 71% of the dropbacks in each of the first 2 games. That dropped all the way to 59% last week. That was a blowout win. I'm not sure if he was pulled late in that game, but we also had Pharaoh Brown make his 2024 debut last week, and he ran her out on 20-something% of dropbacks. So it seems like he might have stolen some playing time from Noah Fant. So just a lot of issues for Fant. Talent still exciting. theoretically. Offense still good, but again, I think Conklin and Kmet look like better bets going forward at this point.
Yeah, for me, it's this simple. There are three better receivers on that team in still Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. So I think one of those guys has to be hurt for Noah Fant to really have upside. He might pop a week here and there, but overall, he's just a best ball guy for me. He comes up because he caught 6 balls in week 3. So I think it's worth mentioning Cade Otton, who caught 7 passes in week 3. But I think even less of an interesting option than Noah Fant, maybe at a similar level. Here's the downside on Cade Otton for me. But aside from everybody saying it's Cade Otton, he's not that good. So last year, there was a 3-game stretch where he got 6, 6, and 9 targets. That stretch ended with that 2-touchdown game for Otton in the huge shootout between Tampa Bay and Houston. There were no other back-to-back games all of last season where Cade Otton saw more than 4 targets. And that's in an offense where there was Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and shrug the rest of the way. So Cade Otton's just a guy who's every once in a while going to pop up, have a game like he did in this loss to the Broncos where he gets enough catches. You're like, I need a tight end. Cade Otton just caught 7 balls. I might as well go get him. He doesn't look like the type of guy who's going to do that with any regularity.
No thanks for me on Cade Otton. He was out there on the field all last year. I think he might even led all tight ends and pass routes last year. He was near the top of the league, but averaged 2.8 catches and 27 yards per game last year. Had just 4 targets total in the previous 2 games this season. Yeah, I mean, the fact that he's out there, he's going to have another, few games where he catches 4 or 5 balls, but there's just very little upside here, and there's going to be a lot more down weeks.
If you're like, crap, what do I do at tight end this week? Then Cade Otton can be your answer. But if you're like, I need somebody with upside, that's not Cade Otton. If you're still on board with this episode, then you clearly like us a little bit. You see some upside. Please consider hitting that YouTube subscribe button. That way you'll find out right when we drop some new content, just the same way that you get notified when Chapel Roan puts out a new video. We'll be helping with waivers and lineup setting throughout the year. And those subscribes, likes, follows, all that lets us know who's out there waiting for the content. So, help us out a little bit. Week 4 streaming defense, Jared. I picked the Raiders last week, so I'll call myself out first because they imploded against Andy Dalton after I said, oh no, Andy Dalton. It didn't work out. The thing to dislike specifically about the Raiders defense is Max Crosby is playing through a high ankle sprain. I'm sure that impacted him in that game. I don't think that it turned them from a good play into a bad play, but it does hurt the Raiders going forward. Even if he continues to play through it, he was not productive on that bad ankle. I'm not interested in that Raiders defense against Cleveland. Tell me who I should like on defense in week 4.
Yeah, I'm just playing either side of this Titans-Dolphins game on Monday night. I think there's going to be a lot of negative plays. The Dolphins are just a mess right now. We'll see who's at quarterback for them. It sounds like Skylar Thompson's not going to be available. It's either going to be Tim Boyle, who is horrible, or Tyler Huntley, who's better, but just joined the team like a week ago. The offensive line is horrible. I think, Tua was helping mask that a bit, but now that you have a lesser quarterback in there with just, lesser pocket awareness and feel like you're going to see a ton of sacks from this team. The Dolphins have a 9.2% sack rate so far, and they have the 4th lowest implied total on the week at just 17.75 points. So I like Tennessee the best. If you can't get them, I think Miami on the other side of that game is a strong play too, because Will Levis. The guy has 15 sacks, 5 interceptions, 3 fumbles through 3 games. He does multiple stupid things every week he's out there. We'll see how long he even lasts under center. It seems like Callahan's already sick of him, but Miami's defense has a lot of upside just because of Levis.
Yeah, I agree with targeting that game. The Bears might be out there in some leagues. Their rostered rate varies quite a bit depending on what site you look at, but they are home for the Rams this week. The Rams have the 6th lowest implied total by the Vegas numbers, despite beating the 49ers last week. So Vegas is still like, not sure we believe in that Rams offense. And the Bears have 6 takeaways in 3 games, 3 sacks each of the first 2 weeks, no more than 21 points allowed to any opponent so far. If the Bears are not available in your league, you might find the teams that Jared just talked about in Shane Hallam's weekly article that highlights streaming defenses on DraftSharks.com. Week 5, Jared, I like Denver, which has the 5th most fantasy points among defenses by ESPN scoring so far. Good fantasy scores all 3 weeks. 2 double-digit totals mixed in there, including this past week where they put up 7 sacks and allowed only 7 points against the Bucs. They are hosting the Raiders in week 5. The Raiders have provided 12 sacks and 5 turnovers to opponents through 3 games. And if that one works out, then you might get another start from Denver against the Chargers in week 6.
I like Denver. I think 2 teams I like better for week 5 that I'd be willing even to go out and grab and stash now if you have some bench space. The Patriots are home for that Dolphins team we talked about. New England's defense is good. I mean, the offense is a mess, but the defense is good. They should not have much trouble slowing down whoever's under center for Miami. And then Seattle is home for the Giants. The Seahawks defense playing awesome under new head coach Mike McDonald. They get Detroit this week, obviously. So even if they were owned in your league, they'll probably be dropped for this Lions matchup. But home for the Giants in week 5 sets them up as a really strong play.
Want to see our highest rated waiver wire targets that are available in your league? Check out the free agent finder, whether you're looking for help this week, trying to stash that defense a week ahead, seeking the highest long-term ceiling. You have all of those sorting options available, tailored to your league settings and synced with your league so you can see who's actually available in your specific league. If you're not a DS insider and struggling without that kind of weekly assistance, just check the show notes below for a discount on the rest of the regular season, because our only purpose here is to be your unfair advantage.